Dear Professor Yacoub, thank you very much for taking an hour of your time in this busy day in Salt Lake City to sit down with me and participate in the history project of the International Society for Heart and Lung Transplantation. As you may know, this project was started to capture the thoughts as well as the memories of the leaders of thoracic transplantation. It is a great pleasure for me to be conducting this interview.
Thank you very much.
Professor, you started to work as a cardiac surgeon in the 1960s. Back then, the field was just starting. Can you tell us about those times and how your first job was?
My first job in cardiothoracic surgery was at the Brompton Hospital, and I was really privileged to witness the very early days of cardiac surgery with pioneers like Lord Brock, Mr. Oswald Tubbs of the Tubbs dilator, a wonderful man, Mr. Norman Barrett of the Barrett ulcer. Again, I can describe him as a genius. So I was really privileged to witness that part of the history of cardiac surgery, and have seen it grow and grow to a very mature specialty as we know it today.
Of course, in the 1960s, the first clinical application of heart transplantation was done, and back then you were not in the field yet. And I would like to know, when you talked to your colleagues and heard the news of the events, what were your thoughts? What were you thinking about this new development?
Actually, we were thinking a lot about cardiac transplantation, which was an experimental procedure at that time. And I was working as a senior registrar at the National Heart Hospital in London. And the consultant at that time was Donald Ross. And we were thinking about applying the procedure even before the first heart transplantation by Chris Barnard. And when it happened, it electrified the world, as you know. And shortly afterwards, Don Ross performed the heart transplantation, and I was involved in that. That was like a few months after the first heart transplantation. The patient lived for 2 weeks, if I remember rightly. And then there was a moratorium about transplantation until the late 70s or 80s.
That is correct. So that must have been, that was of course a difficult time after the initial energizing start. But you started a transplant program at Harefield in 1980. And how did you decide after this moratorium it was the right time to start things and try again to achieve better outcomes?
I was a young consultant at Harefield Hospital, and there was a massive need for the procedure. There were many patients whom we thought at the time could benefit from this procedure. And then there was the experience at Stanford, which showed that the procedure now, particularly with the introduction of cyclosporine, was clinically viable. So I started the program, as you say, in 1980, and there was a lot of controversy at that time because the newspapers and everybody thought it was still, that was in the United Kingdom, an experimental procedure, and they even talked about controversial doctors perform operation which is not needed and all that stuff. At the same time, we were not in central London because Harefield is on the outskirts of London, and the government as well um, considered the operation as experimental and should not be funded by the NHS. However,
Professor Yacoub, maybe before we get to when you started it, you mentioned Harefield was not in the center of London, and I know you were assistant professor at the University of Chicago before you came to Harefield. Can you tell me how you made this decision and how you thought this might be the right place for you to make great things happen?
That's an interesting question, because before I went to the University of Chicago, I attended an interview at Harefield Hospital, and I thought it was a beautiful place because it was built initially as a sanatorium for the treatment of tuberculosis, and then became a regional cardiothoracic center. And I thought the English countryside is really beautiful, and I thought that was very nice. And also there were facilities there because Sir Home Sellers used to go there once a week, so I thought this could be a nice place. But I wanted very much to go to Chicago to do experimental surgery and to see new things. And actually they gave me the job, and I insisted that I really did want to go to Chicago, and if they did not allow me, then I will leave the job. And they, to my surprise, they called me back and said, you are appointed, and we'll allow you to go for 1.5 years, and you should come back after that. Then when I went to Chicago, I liked it so much, and I had offers to stay in Chicago and be an associate professor with tenure. And I was really very hesitant, what should I do now, because I promised to go back to Harefield. And the consultant cardiologist, a wonderful man by the name of Malcolm Towers, was such a gentleman, a great cardiologist as well. And when I went back, and he was so understanding and said, I understand fully, my dear chap, you can stay, or you can do what you want. So that made me feel very small, and I decided to go back and work with Malcolm Towers, who was really a driving force behind many of the things which were achieved there. And the rest is history.
Yeah, so it truly seems like he was a partner in this quest to perform heart transplantation and other things at the Harefield Hospital.
Yeah, initially, I mean, we didn't think of transplantation. We just wanted to establish a strong program, and he had a waiting list, and they were doing 1 case a week. And immediately we went on to 10 cases a week, and with my colleagues, we built a strong service. And then when transplantation came, it was a very busy center and already dedicated to cardiac surgery.
I can still imagine, despite that you made it to be a busy center, that when you moved so fast from a hospital that does 1 pump case per week to being a busy general cardiac center to starting heart transplantation after a long time of moratorium, that people might have had questions. Is this the right thing to do? Did you feel pressures? Did you feel support for that? How was that time?
There was tremendous pressure because the NHS said they're not going to fund it. However, they said there was the so-called clinical freedom, so they could not stop us doing it. And we started collecting money. Actually, people at the local church in Harefield, which is a little village, started collecting money to fund the program. And we started the program, and then the government said we have allocated £2 million, and we thought, wow, that's great. However, this £2 million was actually allocated, they said, for research into the cost effectiveness of the procedure. So initially we were very cross about that because we were struggling to get money to fund the program, and the government just funds research in the cost effectiveness. But that proved to be the very best thing that happened to the program, because we said we will cooperate on condition you tell us as we go where the money is going. So they did actually guide us by saying, you are spending a massive amount of money on things you can do without. So we streamlined the program, and by the time the research project reported to the government, they said it was a highly cost-effective procedure. I think we were spending something like £9,000 per patient per the hospital. So they said this is excellent. So the government and the parliament actually decided to allocate £20 million a year for the program, and that was a very good thing.
And, so from what you are telling me, you must have inspired the people living around the hospital to support you. You also opened your hospital to regulators and told them, come and see what we're doing, and we feel pretty good about it.
Absolutely. I think we could keep talking about me. We were a group of people, we were really convinced that that's the way to go. And we were working very, very hard around the clock. And we established ourselves all the facilities, including cardiac biopsy, interpretation of the results. We used to, in the middle of the night, get the slides and look at the sections. We did a lot of immunological tests and looking for T cells, and when we were challenged, why should the program remain at half year, we didn't want to go to central London. We thought this was a beautiful hospital, specialized only in cardiac surgery, but had other specialists only to support cardiac surgery, and we didn't want to go to central London. So we were challenged again, and said, people said, but is this the best environment for cardiac transplantation and later cardiac heart and lung transplantation? And so we invited them to come and review the program, and there was a distinguished panel of immunologists, cardiologists from London and outside London and international, who came to assess the program very critically, and came up with a long report actually supporting the continuation of the program in this environment. So that was a triumph, if you like, for peer review and being open and making sure that everything we do was appropriate. So that stimulated the program even more rather than hampered it.
That's fascinating. So people are coming telling you we'll give you a bigger place and more resources, and you said, I have my team here and we'll continue what we started to set out to do. And if I have the numbers correct, you did 1,000 transplants in the first decade, and 2,500 transplants have been done by your team since then, in addition to the first decade. So that is amazing.
Yeah, the program continued from strength to strength. I mean, now we're celebrating, or the program is celebrating 30 years of transplantation. They keep writing to me about how 30-year survivors from the initial group are going strong. But obviously there's room for more improvements in terms of better immunosuppressions, etc., etc.
So talking about improvement, I know that you also started a research program at Harefield Hospital, which it was not there when you came. That must have been a very new approach for people who were at the hospital at the time when you started your work there.
Yes, exactly. From day one, from the transplant program and even before, we had emphasis on research and the use of basic science in particular. And when I was appointed as the first British Heart Foundation Professor of Cardiac Surgery, I took the opportunity to establish a strong basic science group. Actually, in the Department of Surgery, we were 20, and only 3 surgeons, and the rest are all basic scientists, including molecular biologists, protein chemists, and all types of support for the program.
Now, now you have embraced the field of mechanical circulatory assist very early as well. And your report on myocardial recovery after LVAD unloading has catalyzed deep interest of many research teams in this field. And I must say also given hope to clinicians and patients that very advanced forms of heart failure could be cured. Can you tell us how you moved this research idea so quickly to the bedside?
I was always fascinated by the biology of the heart and how sophisticated it is, and obviously you could not apply transplantation to every patient, and therefore we had to use machines, but I thought this is a great opportunity to use the machines as a means of allowing the heart to recover. And there were some reports, both from Houston and from Germany, of isolated improvement in heart function in non-ischemic cardiomyopathy to allow the device to be removed. And I immediately, with the group and with the basic scientists, set out to try and maximize the rate of recovery and the length of recovery after removing the device. And we started a program dedicated to bridge the recovery.
That's also a fascinating story. Now, in 1999, you were knighted by the Queen for services for cardiac surgery. I think the institution of knighthood sparks the imagination of people, and therefore I would like to ask you if you could share with us how that happens physically, but maybe more importantly, what it meant and means for you and for the team who has worked with you.
Yeah, I think this is, as you said, knighthood or to be a Sir. It is granted for several reasons. One of them is political, other is for professional reasons, like services to the community or to science or both. And in my case, that was for services to cardiac surgery. And obviously, I'm only one representative of the team, and this sparked a lot of elation and happiness in the team. We are being appreciated by the country and by the Queen personally, and this happens by members of the public writing to the Queen repeatedly. And then she appoints a committee to investigate what is this all about. And then the Queen informs, after the committee reports, the Prime Minister, and it's done in a very subtle way, because suddenly, like 2 months before Christmas, I get a letter from the Prime Minister saying that Her Majesty the Queen has decided to give you a knighthood in recognition. Do you accept or not? Because it's very important that
you were willing to accept.
accept. And if you do not talk to anybody, maybe you can talk to your wife, but nobody else, until New Year's Eve. And suddenly it's announced on New Year's Eve a list of the knighthoods, and after that you are not allowed to use the title of a sir until you go to the palace to meet the queen and to be knighted, and you actually kneel and she touches you with a sword, and like you see in the movies, and it says, "Rise, Sir Magdi," and you can use the title. But I felt proud, obviously, because of the team, and I really stressed that at all times, that this is not a personal thing. This is more a team and institutional honor. But it was interesting. You get to know that there is something happening, because the Queen, before this happens, keeps inviting you to a luncheon at the palace. What does that mean? You know?
So it's a lunch only first, before it's a dinner. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing this with us, this very personal story. Now, Professor Yacoub, you devote a large amount of time to your charitable foundation, Chain of Hope. Can you tell us how you set up this foundation and how it became so effective in providing help to thousands of children and adults in Africa and other continents?
I have always been interested in healthcare delivery, and although the first part of my career was devoted to mastering everything, techniques and ideas and this and that, but I've always been impressed by the fact that there are those who have and those who have not, and that I found very helpful, and that it needed to be addressed. So at the first opportunity, I started traveling with some of my colleagues to Jamaica and to Africa, and then realized that this cannot be done on isolated occasions, and cannot be done without following on, because the patient, without having a system, this was wrong, and therefore about 20 years ago I established this charity called the Chain of Hope UK. It was modeled on another charity in France, La Chaîne de l'Espoir, but Chain of Hope UK was independent, but obviously interacting with other charities around the world. And the idea was to treat children from neglected areas around the world. First, bring them to the UK to show the community that this can work, and then working with colleagues in the country to establish hospitals and services, first to look after the children, then to start doing the cases themselves, initially with our missions, but eventually to be totally sustainable. We also insisted that a significant part of the effort should be dedicated to research and development, not only having the service at the very highest level, but also researching into the efficacy and what is being done, what needs to be done locally, because the diseases are quite different, apart from the different forms of congenital heart disease. You have, for example, an epidemic of endomyocardial fibrosis in Mozambique, so we had to research with the local people, and they published in New England Journal of Medicine about the epidemiology of the disease, and then we evolved the methods for treating it. And so research was a very important element, and this has expanded and expanded and it is a very satisfying effort for all concerned with this big organization.
Professor Yacoub, I would like to finish up by asking you, for those who are thinking about entering our field or who just started in thoracic transplantation, looking back, what would be your advice to the young surgeon or physician or coordinator, nurse, lab professional? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think what I would advise is that first to realize that it's a very hard job. I mean, they have to work very hard. Second is that they have to be convinced that this is precisely what they want to do. And if they have a passion for delivering this form of therapy to very needy patients, then they should go into it and follow their passion.
Sir Magdi Yacoub, it's been a privilege. Thank you for sharing with all of us.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.